Thank you, Frank, for that generous introduction, and thank all of you, for showing up here on a Saturday, which shows that you are, truly patriots to be here to try to help us save this country. Now, grid security threats, the electric grid, threats to the electric grid, seems like such a boring topic, but I tell you that the current equivalent of the Battle of Tours, the Battle of Lepanto, and the Siege of Vienna that turned back the Islamic threat to Western civilization is our current struggle to protect the electric grid of the United States. Our adversaries have a new way of warfare that's focused not on defeating the Marines in the battlefield, but it's focused at coming at the electric grid and our critical civilian, that supports all of our critical civilian infrastructures as a means of collapsing our civilization. This is in the military doctrines of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. They practice it, and it's an ongoing threat to us right now. They have a vision of using a combination of cyber attacks, physical sabotage, and the ultimate, what they consider an EMP threat, the ultimate threat, a nuclear EMP attack. Just takes one weapon detonated at high altitude. This is the modern equivalent of the Siege of Vienna, and we must win it. We must win it. Go to the first view graph. No, back. Back.
To the sun.
To the sun. The previous view graph. You skipped ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Tommy. All right. We also face this threat from nature. Pictured here, it's not an artist's conception. In 2012, we finally had satellites up that could take a photograph of a coronal mass ejection coming off of the sun. The little blue dot down below there is an approximation of the size of the Earth relative to one of these coronal mass ejections. Every now and then, one of these things, a very large coronal mass ejection, will hit the Earth, and it will cause a natural EMP. An EMP is basically a it's like a super energetic radio wave. It's got so much energy in it that it will destroy electronic systems. It'll collapse the electric power grid, burn out the extra high voltage transformers, burn out SCADA systems. And if you think about it, our civilization depends on electricity. We're a modern electronic civilization. Without electricity, there's no communications, transportation systems won't work, business and finance collapses the economy, and there's not even any food and water. Everything depends directly or indirectly upon electricity. We narrowly missed getting hit. Now, there are geomagnetic storms that happen routinely, but what we're most concerned about is the occurrence of what's called a geomagnetic superstorm, like the 1859 Carrington event or the 1921 railroad storm. Every century or so, we get hit by one of these things like a Carrington event. We're basically in a game of Russian roulette with the sun. There was a report by the NASA in 2014, July 2014, that in 2012, in the year 2012, in fact it was July 23rd, 2012, we were narrowly missed by a Carrington-class coronal mass ejection. It crossed the path of the Earth and missed us by just 3 days. If the Earth had been in orbit 3 days earlier, we would have encountered a coronal mass ejection like this that's pictured on this satellite image. And that would have collapsed electric grids and critical infrastructures all over the world and put billions of lives at risk. So even apart from the threat from Islam and Russia and China and North Korea, we face a natural EMP threat that must be addressed. NASA estimates that the likelihood of encountering an 1859 Carrington event in a recurrence of a geomagnetic superstorm like that is 12% per decade, which virtually guarantees that we will experience this in our lifetimes or that of our children. Next view graph. This can also be done by man. A single nuclear weapon detonated over the center of the United States at an altitude of about 300 to 400 kilometers would put an EMP field over all 48 contiguous United States. This is why Iran wants the bomb. They openly write about it. And we have seen them practice this scenario, launching satellites that are orbit over the south polar trajectory to try to evade our national missile defenses, and at the altitude for doing an EMP. But we've also seen them practice launching off of ships, and North Korea has as well. Next view graph. A third source of EMP threat is from what's called radio frequency weapons or non-nuclear EMP weapons. These are not as potent or as far-reaching as a nuclear EMP with a single nuclear weapon. You know, you could basically black out the whole United States and collapse all of the life-sustaining critical infrastructures. And by the way, the Congressional EMP Commission on which I served estimated that if we had a nationwide blackout that lasted 1 year, and a nuclear EMP attack would do that, a blackout that would last at least 1 year, you know, we could lose up to 9 of 10 Americans. 90% of our population would die from starvation, disease, and societal collapse. That's why Iran wants the bomb. I actually think they have the bomb already. North Korea has the bomb. They've got the bomb, and they can already threaten us with this attack. And China and Russia also have contingency plans for such an attack. But going back to radio frequency weapons, you know, an individual can build radio frequency weapons using unclassified design information available on the internet. This is an advertisement in a U.S. newspaper. You can actually buy. This is not intended to be used as a weapon. It's manufactured by an American manufacturer. It's actually a diagnostic tool that's used for peaceful purposes in industries. But it generates 100 kilovolts per meter over a short distance. And it could be used as an EMP weapon. And you don't even need a license to buy it. It's basically a weapon of mass destruction that anybody could buy out of a magazine. And you don't even need a license. You know, we've arrived at a place where our technological society is so complex and so interwoven, and the power of modern technology is so great that a terrorist, a criminal, or a madman could buy one of these, you know, put it in the trunk of a car, park that car near drive it up to a transformer substation, and a single individual can now topple the technological pillars of a major metropolitan area. You know, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission put out a report warning that if you knew there are 9 key transformer substations out of the 2,000 big EHV transformer substations in the United States, and it wouldn't be that hard to figure out which 9, but if you took out just 9 of those, it would cause cascading failures through the grid that would black out the whole country for 18 months. And if you recall, if we had a 1-year blackout, given our current state of unpreparedness, that could kill up to 90% of our population. So these are the 3 sources of the EMP threat: Mother Nature from the sun, a nuclear EMP attack, or the use of radio frequency weapons. Next view graph. And these are not just theoretical threats, these are real threats. You may recall back in 2013, Kim Jong-un, in the aftermath of North Korea's 3rd illegal nuclear test, started making threats to strike the United States and our allies for economic sanctions that we were imposing on North Korea to punish them for that 3rd illegal nuclear test. Here he's pictured in his command post, surrounded by his general staff, and the map on the back of the wall talks about nuclear missile strikes against North America. And he does have an ICBM, the KN-08, that can reach the United States today. Admiral William Gortney, the commander of NORAD, said that on April 7th. And we have seen them orbit satellites. Go on, next view graph. One of them, the KSM-3, which in the midst of this nuclear crisis, when North Korea was threatening to strike America, orbited over the United States. And this is the pass of the KSM-3 satellite during the nuclear crisis with North Korea from April 8th to April 17th. On April 12th, it was positioned in such a place in the iconic location, at the iconic altitude, you know, to place an EMP field over all 48 contiguous United States. On April 16th, it passed over the Washington, D.C., New York City corridor. So the peak EMP field would have been over our political and economic capital if that satellite were a nuclear weapon, and it would have collapsed the eastern grid. All you have to really do is take out the eastern grid. There's 3 grids: the Texas grid, the western grid, and the eastern grid. The eastern grid generates 75% of our electricity, and most of our population lives under that. And if you just take out the eastern grid, that does us in, and we've lost the siege of Vienna. On that same day, was it a coincidence? Out on the western grid, parties unknown attacked the Metcalf transformer substation that services the San Francisco area and the Silicon Valley with AK-47s. The U.S. Navy SEALs that investigated this concluded that this was that this was a professional attack and probably plans for a larger attack against our national grid at some time in the future. There's a lot more to this briefing, but my 15 minutes are up, and I think I have to transition to, I'm going to transition gladly to questions, but let's just go to one last view graph. Go beyond that one. No, let's go to go on, keep going. I just want them to see this one. Go on, one more. Here's another real world thing that happened. A couple of months after they orbited that satellite, we intercepted North Korean freighter trying to sneak through the Panama Canal. It had already gone through the Gulf of Mexico. And hidden under thousands of bags of sugar, we found 2 SA-2 nuclear-capable missiles hidden in the hold of that freighter. Now, they didn't have nuclear warheads on them, but these missiles are designed to carry a 10-kiloton nuclear warhead, so that North Korea appears to have practiced attacking the United States by EMP both by satellite and by launching off of a freighter, which was the EMP Commission's nightmare scenario, because that's a way of keeping your fingerprints off the attack. You know, we would probably never be able to figure out, if they did an EMP attack off a freighter, who executed that strike. Well, that concludes my remarks. I thank you so much for coming here on a Saturday morning to hear us out, and I would encourage you in closing, don't wait for Washington to solve these problems. Washington has been trying and failing for years to solve these problems. You can protect your own state. It's called islanding. And you are fortunate to have a gentleman in this room, Thomas Popick, who's going to speak later, who's the chairman of the Foundation for Resilient Societies, who can help New Hampshire protect its own grid. You can protect your grid here so that even if the national grid went down, New Hampshire would at least keep the lights on. And then you could be like, as Calvin Coolidge said of Vermont, that if some cataclysm were to inflict the whole United States, the whole could be reconstructed from the brave little state of Vermont. Well, that can also be true of New Hampshire. So I guess I'll open it up for, thank you, Phil.